There comes a moment in every connection when you realize that chasing someone doesn't pull them closer, it pushes them away. You think if you love harder, give more, reach further, they'll finally open their heart. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop chasing, that's when they start craving you. Because your stillness, your decision to let go, it carries power. It tells the universe and them, I choose me. And that choice shakes something deep in the avoidant soul. You see, avoidants aren't running from you, they're running from themselves. From the mirror that love holds up, showing them all the places they've buried their tenderness, their fear, their longing. When you stop chasing, you take the mirror away. You remove the pressure. Suddenly, they can breathe again. But in that breath, they feel the emptiness, the absence of your presence that used to fill the air around them. That silence becomes haunting. Because your energy was never just about pursuit, it was life. It was connection. It was the reminder that they were still capable of being loved. And here's the divine truth. What they crave is not your attention. It's your essence, that part of you that was grounded, warm, forgiving, endlessly giving. But when you stopped chasing, something beautiful happened. You reclaimed your energy. You started loving yourself with the same intensity you once gave to them. You stopped waiting for permission to be seen. And that, my friend, is what calls them back. It's not a game. It's an energetic rebalancing. The moment your worth stops depending on their response, you rise above the dynamic that trapped both of you. Your peace becomes magnetic. Your silence becomes sacred. And your distance becomes the very thing that teaches them what real connection feels like, not control, not anxiety, but freedom wrapped in love. They crave you because you represent the place where love wasn't a prison, where they didn't have to perform to be accepted. And when you let go, they realize something: the safety they always sought in solitude was hiding in your presence. But now you've evolved. You're no longer chasing love, you are love. You're no longer pleading for validation, you radiate it. That energy doesn't beg, it attracts, it transforms, it teaches without words. So when the avoidant returns, and they often do, it's not because you finally played it right. It's because you became what they've been searching for all along, a love rooted in power, not need. Remember this: letting go is not rejection, it's revelation. It reveals who you are when you no longer chase what doesn't meet you halfway. It reveals how strong, how divine, how worthy you've always been. And as you stand there in your peace, they'll feel it, the shift, the stillness, the truth. They'll crave not the person who chased them, but the soul who outgrew the chase. Because that's the energy that no avoidant can forget, the love that loved deeply, but also knew when to walk away. The love that said, "I'll meet you when you're ready to me." Ate yourself. That's not loss. That's liberation. And in that liberation, you become unforgettable. Avoidants don't truly fear love. They fear losing themselves inside it. Their instinct to pull away isn't a rejection of connection. It's a survival mechanism built over years of emotional conditioning. Deep down, every avoidant longs for closeness, but the moment it starts to feel too consuming, they panic. Love, to them, feels like surrendering control. And for someone who has learned to rely only on themselves, control equals safety. So when someone chases them, it triggers that old wiring, the fear that love will come with expectations, demands, or loss of independence. They start to feel cornered, suffocated, even if the other person's intentions are pure. Now imagine what happens when you stop chasing. When you no longer reach out, analyze, or push for connection, the avoidant suddenly feels a freedom they haven't felt in a long time. And that freedom, paradoxically, becomes the very thing that pulls them toward you. Because for the first time, love doesn't feel like a trap. It feels safe. The air between you opens up. The pressure dissolves. What they experience is a shift from being hunted to being invited. That difference is everything. Avoidants crave a love that gives them room to breathe. But until someone actually steps back, they don't even realize what that means. Your stillness gives them a taste of what love could be: calm, grounded, and free of demand. They start to miss your energy, not because you are constantly giving it, but because your absence feels different now. It's not silent with resentment, it's peaceful, self-assured, and powerful. That peace calls to them in a way that emotional pursuit never could. You see, when someone chases an avoidant, it validates their old fear that closeness means control. But when you stop chasing, you rewrite that story. You send a message, without words you are free to go, and I am free to stay whole. That freedom disarms them. It confuses the patterns that have guided them all their life. They start to question why your calm feels so magnetic, why your distance feels so alive. The irony is that freedom, the thing they thought they had to protect, now exists most vividly in your presence, even when you're no longer pursuing them. On a deeper level, what they're craving is the emotional safety you embody when you stop chasing. You've shown them that love doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to swallow their individuality. It can exist between two sovereign souls, each complete in their own right. That realization is profound for someone who has always associated intimacy with losing identity. And this is where divine timing comes in. Sometimes, the greatest gift you give someone is the space to rediscover their own truth. When you stop running after them, they finally have to sit with themselves without distraction, without rescue. They feel the void your energy once filled, and in that silence, something shifts. They begin to see that love and freedom were never opposites, they were always meant to coexist. This is why avoidants often crave the one who stopped chasing, because that person becomes the embodiment of balance. You represent the kind of love that doesn't demand sacrifice, the kind of presence that doesn't consume. Your energy whispers instead of shouts. It doesn't say come back. It says, you're safe here if you choose to return. And that, to an avoidant, is irresistible. Freedom that feels safe, that's what every avoidant is unconsciously seeking. When you stop chasing, you create a space where love feels like choice, not pressure. And in that sacred space, they can finally relax into what they've feared, the most true connection. When you stop chasing, your energy transforms. It shifts from desperation to self-possession, from fear to faith, from attachment to alignment. That shift is magnetic, not because it's manipulative, but because it comes from truth. People can sense it, even if they can't explain it. The avoidant, who once felt cornered by your intensity, now feels the pull of your new calm confidence. They can feel that something in you has changed. You are no longer reaching for their validation to feel complete. You've remembered who you are, and that remembrance radiates through your presence. This energetic shift is not subtle, it's powerful. When you were chasing, your energy said, I need you to feel whole. When you stop, your energy says, I already am. That's the moment the balance of attraction reverses. The avoidant, who used to run from emotional pursuit, begins to feel drawn toward the stillness that once frightened them. Because at your core, you've become what every soul seeks, someone rooted in peace, not in need. Your detachment isn't cold, it's warm with self-respect. It's quiet but undeniable. The moment you stop chasing, you reclaim your power. You're no longer dancing to the rhythm of their distance. You've chosen your own rhythm, one of dignity and groundedness. That inner decision sends out a frequency stronger than any words could ever communicate. It's the frequency of someone who knows their worth, who doesn't beg to be chosen because they already have chosen themselves. That's what transforms the dynamic entirely. The avoidant begins to sense that your energy no longer revolves around them. The gravitational pull they once felt, the emotional intensity they tried to escape has dissolved. Yet strangely, they start to feel something new, curiosity, attraction, even longing. It's not about your absence, it's about your energy being clean again, unattached, alive. You've shifted from chasing love to embodying it, and that energy is irresistible. When you chase someone, you unknowingly send a message that they have something you lack. You project your power outward, and the other person feels it as pressure. But when you stop, you pull all that energy back into yourself. You start creating instead of craving. You invest that same passion, time, and emotion into your growth, your healing, your purpose, and suddenly you're vibrating at a higher level, one that says, I don't chase, I attract. The avoidant feels that shift even if you say nothing. It's energetic truth, undeniable, unspoken, but deeply felt. There's something incredibly attractive about a person who doesn't need to convince anyone to stay. That kind of self-containment carries quiet strength. It's the strength of someone who understands that love is not about possession, but resonance. The avoidant, who has spent their life trying to protect their independence, recognizes that energy instinctively. It doesn't threaten them, it soothes them. They begin to crave the safety that radiates from your self-worth. You become the very thing they've been seeking: freedom that loves, love that doesn't bind. When you operate from a place of self-worth, your interactions shift from performance to authenticity. You no longer speak or act out of fear of losing someone. You move from the truth of your being. That truth carries more power than any pursuit ever could. The avoidant begins to feel the difference between someone trying to pull them in and someone simply existing in their full light. The latter becomes unforgettable because it awakens something ancient and pure inside them, the desire to be near real energy, the kind that doesn't demand but inspires. The transformation isn't just about them, it's about you returning to your center. You start realizing that your energy is sacred, and where you place it determines the quality of your life. When you stop chasing, you stop leaking energy. You become whole again, and that wholeness, that peace, becomes the most attractive force in the world. That's why the avoidant begins to crave you once you've stopped chasing. Because your energy no longer asks, it invites. It no longer grasps, it glows. You've moved from need to power, and power in its purest form is love without fear. When you stop chasing an avoidant, something profound happens. You hold up a mirror they can no longer look away from. For so long, your pursuit allowed them to keep running from themselves. Every time they pulled away and you followed, it reinforced their belief that love was something external, something to control, to manage, to escape from when it got too close. But when you step back, the chase ends, and what's left is silence, a silence that reflects their own emotional avoidance. In that stillness, they are finally faced with the very thing they've been avoiding: their own heart. Avoidants spend much of their emotional life in survival mode. Connection feels dangerous because it stirs up old memories, memories of being engulfed, rejected, or unseen. So, they create emotional distance to protect themselves. But your detachment disrupts that cycle. When you no longer chase, you take away their escape route. They can no longer hide behind your pursuit, your constant reassurance, your emotional labor. What's left is themselves, their feelings, their fears, their emptiness. That moment of confrontation is uncomfortable, even painful, but it's also transformational. Your detachment is not punishment, it's reflection. You become a mirror that shows them what real emotional maturity looks like: calm, balanced, and self-contained. You're no longer trying to fix, prove, or earn love. You're simply being love. That kind of presence shines light on their patterns without judgment, and light always exposes truth. For the first time, they begin to feel the contrast between emotional safety and emotional chaos. Your peace highlights their unrest. Your self-respect magnifies their self-avoidance. And deep down, something begins to awaken. This awakening isn't immediate. It unfolds slowly, like the realization of a truth they've long resisted. The avoidant begins to sense that what they once saw as weakness, emotional vulnerability, openness, and connection might actually be strength. Your detachment doesn't read as rejection, it reads as self-mastery. You've stopped reacting. And in that pause, they begin to see themselves through a new lens. They see how their fear of intimacy has kept them from experiencing real connection. They start questioning why they push away what feels safe, why they sabotage love when it shows up gently, and why your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. This is where the real transformation begins, not just for them, but for you as well. Because when you stop chasing, you become emotionally neutral. You no longer dance between hope and disappointment. You embody balance. That balance becomes a living example of emotional maturity, the very thing the avoidant secretly desires, but doesn't know how to create. They start craving the steadiness you embody, the self-assurance you've cultivated. It's not about wanting you back for validation. It's about wanting to understand how you became that centered, that peaceful. Your detachment becomes an emotional mirror that invites growth. Without saying a word, you communicate a deeper truth: that love doesn't require control or chase it requires awareness. The avoidant begins to see that love is not supposed to threaten their freedom, but to enhance it. Your ability to let go teaches them that emotional connection and individuality can coexist. They start to understand that the love they've been avoiding is not the kind that consumes, but the kind that expands. The moment you stop chasing, you stop enabling their avoidance. You stop being the distraction that shields them from their inner world. Instead, you become a reflection of possibility, a living proof that emotional connection can exist without losing oneself. That realization is powerful because it awakens something buried beneath layers of fear, the desire to heal, to grow, to love without running. And this is why they begin to crave you again. Not because you withdrew, but because your energy evolved. You've become a mirror that reflects both their pain and their potential. They feel that the quiet power of someone who loves without attachment. Your presence, even from afar, becomes an invitation to meet themselves at a deeper level. And once that mirror has been held up, they can never unsee it. Respect is one of the most magnetic energies in any relationship, and when you stop chasing, you reclaim it, both from yourself and from the avoidant. When you were pursuing them, even out of love, what you were really doing was handing them all the power. Every time you reached out first, tried to fix the silence, or sought reassurance, you unconsciously told them that their attention determined your worth. But when you stop chasing, that dynamic collapses. You pull your energy back, you take your power home, and in doing so, you remind both of you what true value looks like, value that doesn't beg, but attracts, love that doesn't plead, but commands quiet respect. Avoidants don't respond well to pressure because pressure reminds them of the emotional traps they've spent their life escaping. The more you tried to hold on, the more they needed to break free. But when you let go, you change the entire energy field between you. Suddenly, they're not running from you anymore. They're faced with a version of you that stands tall, calm, and dignified. That energy is impossible to ignore. It speaks louder than any message or apology ever could. It says, I am enough, even without your validation. That realization hits differently because it shifts the balance of power back to equality. When someone respects you, it's not because you demanded it, it's because your actions made it undeniable. Stopping the chase is an act of emotional self-respect. It tells the universe, I trust my worth enough to release what isn't meeting me halfway. And the moment you embody that truth, something remarkable happens. Others begin to feel it too. The avoidant, who once took your energy for granted, now sees it in a new light. What was once constant is now absent. What was once available on demand now carries boundaries. That absence creates awareness. That boundary creates admiration. You see, avoidants don't crave chaos, they crave authenticity. And when you stop chasing, your energy becomes authentic again, not fueled by fear or need, but by inner certainty. That's what reignites respect. Because deep down, everyone, even the emotionally distant, respects someone who knows when to walk away with grace. Your stillness becomes strength. Your silence becomes integrity. The avoidant starts to see you not as someone who's waiting for them to choose, but as someone who already chose themselves. That shift is deeply attractive because it's rare. Love without boundaries loses value. Attention without self-respect loses impact. When you stop chasing, you restore both. You become selective with your energy. You no longer hand out emotional access to someone who hasn't earned it. And that's when the avoidant begins to feel your worth, not because you forced them to, but because they finally have the space to witness what they lost. Respect grows in the soil of distance. It needs silence, reflection, and contrast. When you stop giving too much, they finally see how much you were giving. When you step back, they finally understand the weight of your presence. Brother. This is the moment where attraction deepens, not the surface-level attraction built on pursuit, but the soul-level pull that comes from reverence. The avoidant begins to realize that your love wasn't weakness, it was devotion. And your decision to let go wasn't coldness, it was strength. That realization rewrites their internal story about you. You are no longer the one who chases, you are the one who leads. Not through control, but through example. You teach them, without words, that love rooted in self-respect is the only kind worth having. When you stop chasing, you send a message that transcends ego. I respect myself enough to love you without losing me. And that's the kind of energy that commands respect in return. The avoidant begins to feel it, even from afar, the quiet, steady pulse of someone who's no longer bound by fear. That respect doesn't just draw them back, it transforms how they see love entirely. Because when you honor yourself, you teach them how to honor you, too. And that's when love stops being a power struggle and becomes a meeting of equals. Silence has a language all its own, one that speaks deeper truths than words ever could. When you stop chasing an avoidant, your silence becomes a mirror, a vibration, a message that echoes through every corner of their awareness. It's not an empty silence, it's charged, alive, and full of meaning. Because your absence isn't just physical, it's energetic. It represents everything they once felt but didn't understand. Everything they once ran from but can't quite forget. Silence, when born from peace and not resentment, becomes the ultimate form of presence. It lingers, it teaches, it transforms. Avoidants often live in the noise of their own mind, constantly analyzing, protecting, avoiding vulnerability. They've built internal walls to keep their emotions manageable. But when you stop chasing, you take away one of their greatest distractions, the noise of pursuit. Suddenly, there are no more texts to ignore, no more messages to deflect, no more energy coming toward them that they can control. There's only quiet. And in that quiet, something sacred happens. They begin to hear themselves. They begin to feel the weight of what's missing. Your silence doesn't punish them. It invites them. It creates a space where their defenses start to lower, not because you force them to, but because there's nothing left to resist. The energy that once felt overwhelming has now transformed into stillness, and that stillness calls to their soul. It reminds them of your essence, calm, steady, rooted in truth. The mind may try to forget, but the body remembers peace. The heart remembers presence, and your silence becomes a living reminder of the connection that existed without needing to chase it. This is why silence is so powerful. It doesn't attack. It doesn't plead. It reveals. It shows who's willing to meet you halfway and who's not. It shows the strength of your boundaries and the depth of your energy. The avoidant, who once ran to protect their freedom, begins to sense something strange. The space they once craved now feels empty. The quiet they used to desire begins to echo with your absence. The peace they thought they'd find in solitude doesn't feel the same anymore, because now it's missing the balance your energy brought. When you were chasing, your presence was constant, predictable, even comforting. But when you stepped back, the silence became unpredictable. It disrupted their expectations. It forced awareness. Avoidants are drawn to familiarity, and your absence breaks that pattern. It creates contrast. And in that contrast, they start to miss not just you, but the feeling of being seen without pressure, loved without demand. Your silence speaks to that deeper part of them that doesn't know how to express longing, yet feels it intensely when confronted with stillness. Hebrew silence also communicates emotional maturity. It says, I don't need to prove my worth through noise. It shows that your peace no longer depends on their engagement. That energy shift is magnetic because it feels sovereign, whole. You're no longer giving energy away in hopes of being chosen. You've become the chooser. The avoidant feels this shift, even if they can't articulate it. Your stillness now carries more gravity than your words ever did. The beauty of silence is that it teaches through contrast. When you were reaching out, they could escape into avoidance. But in silence, there's nowhere to hide. Every unspoken word, every moment of stillness becomes a mirror that reflects what they once ignored: the value of your energy, the peace of your presence, and the truth of what real connection feels like. Your absence begins to whisper louder than your presence once shouted. Ibri, and that's when something in them begins to soften. The defenses, the walls, the old stories, they start to crack. Because your silence doesn't just remove you from their life, it brings them closer to themselves. It awakens the awareness that they pushed away someone who wasn't trying to control them, but simply trying to love them. That realization lingers long after the words fade. Hebrew. In the end, silence becomes your greatest teacher and their greatest mirror. It's not distance, it's presence without noise. And that presence has a way of reaching even the most closed hearts, because silence, when held with love and self-respect, becomes the voice of the soul, and that's the one voice they can never outrun. Love that doesn't demand but inspires, that's the kind of love that leaves a permanent imprint on the heart of an avoidant. It's not the loud, chasing, persuasive kind of love that tries to convince or prove. It's the quiet, grounded, steady energy that simply is. When you stop chasing and begin to embody that kind of love, you step into your power. You no longer give love as a transaction or a plea, you give it as an overflow of who you are. That shift changes everything, because while an avoidant may resist intensity, they are drawn to authenticity. And the purest form of authenticity is love that stands on its own, unshaken, undemanding, yet deeply felt. Avoidants crave safety even when they run from it. They want to love and be loved, but they've learned to associate closeness with pressure. When love comes with expectations, text me more, tell me how you feel, show me you care, their nervous system goes into defense mode. But love that inspires rather than demands feels different. It doesn't ask them to be someone they're not. It doesn't chase or push. It simply creates space for them to come closer when they're ready. And that space feels like freedom, the one thing their hearts have always longed for. When you embody love that inspires, your energy says you are free, and I am whole. That statement, whether spoken or not, penetrates deeper than any form of persuasion. It's love without agenda. It's love rooted in truth, not fear. And this kind of energy doesn't just attract an avoidant, it heals them. Because for perhaps the first time, they experience connection without control, affection without anxiety. Your love becomes a mirror that shows them what real intimacy feels like: soft, inviting, safe. The most powerful love is never the one that demands to be seen. It's the one that radiates so brightly it cannot be ignored. You become that light when you stop chasing. You stop trying to make someone understand your worth, because you finally embody it. Your calmness, your detachment, your presence, it all begins to inspire rather than pursue. You're no longer trying to get love, you're showing what love is. And in that energy, the avoidant begins to feel drawn, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity and admiration. You see, when love is free of demand, it carries no resistance. It moves like water, gentle, natural, undeniable, and even the hardest hearts eventually yield to water. Your energy begins to soften the avoidance walls, not because you forced them down, but because you showed that connection can coexist with freedom. This teaches them something life-changing, that love is not meant to take, but to awaken. You stop being the pursuer and become the catalyst, the living proof that love can be both strong and soft, both detached and devoted. The beauty of inspiring love is that it doesn't lose its power in absence. It lingers, it echoes, it leaves traces of peace where others left pressure. The avoidant, long after you've stepped away, will still feel your energy, not as guilt or fear, but as calm recognition. They will remember that you never demanded more from them than they were ready to give, and that remembrance becomes a quiet ache, a realization that love could have been so simple. This kind of love is rare. It doesn't see validation. It creates resonance. It doesn't fight to be understood. It speaks in frequency. It moves beyond the ego's games into the soul's truth. That's why it's unforgettable. It inspires not because it tries to, but because it reflects something divine, a love that honors both connection and individuality. When you love without demand, you send a powerful message to the universe: I trust love enough to release it. That trust becomes your greatest strength. It transforms your relationships, but more importantly, it transforms you. Because love that inspires doesn't just heal others, it heals you too. It reminds you that love isn't meant to be a chase, but a state of being. And once you embody that truth, you no longer need to be chosen. You become the choice. In the end, the truth is beautifully simple. Love was never about chasing, convincing, or proving. It was always about becoming. When you finally stop running after what was never meant to be forced, you awaken to a deeper power within yourself, the power to love freely, stand firmly, and let go gracefully. You realize that real connection doesn't require control, it requires consciousness. And from that awareness you rise, not bitter, but wiser, not empty, but overflowing, because you've learned that the kind of love that stays is the one that breathes, not binds. So, to everyone listening, may you walk forward with open hearts and unshakable peace, knowing that what's meant for you will always find its way not through the chase, but through alignment. Thank you for listening. Thank you for growing. And until next time, stay grounded, stay inspired, and remember love begins within you.